You can use the chat if you want to tell people where you're located, you're welcome to greet other people, and then also use it to submit questions, which we'll address after I have my presentation. So we'll go ahead and get started. It's nice to see so many of you this evening, unless it's afternoon for someone if they're somewhere else. My name is Ailene Gerhardt. I'm an independent board certified patient advocate, a certified senior advisor, and a solo aging educator. And I work with people navigating the healthcare system, and I am very committed to community education and in giving talks frequently about healthcare advocacy and other pieces of navigating the healthcare system. People would come up to me during Q&As or after talks and share that they were having trouble identifying a healthcare proxy or trying to figure out a plan, and all of these different pieces that they didn't have a reliable support network to rely on. And so as I dove down the topic and looked at solo aging and was fortunate to land on some really good resources that were already written, I started developing more and more interest and more of a focus on solo aging and working with solo agers. And so I'm fortunate that I speak all over Massachusetts and I'm fortunate to speak all over the country. Our Milton Council on Aging series in partnership with the Milton Library is funded by a Mass Council on Aging grant, which has given us the opportunity to offer this series in the fall in person in Milton, and some of you may have been there in 3D, and then to also offer the series this way via Zoom in partnership with the library in an evening option for anyone who might not be able to access the council during the day. We just thought that this would expand people's reach. So we are very grateful to MCOA for that grant. I am very grateful to Milton Council on Aging and the library for the partnership in being able to offer this series. I have a number of slides that I will be sharing, and then after I go through the presentation, I will address the questions that come up or the comments that come up in chat. So feel free, hopefully everyone has access to that no matter what device you're using, that you feel comfortable writing in chat, and we'll go ahead and look at those afterward. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Patiently wait for my computer to load. Okay. So as I said, my name is Ailene Gerhardt. I have my own business, Beacon Patient Solutions. I created an online resource for solo agers called the Navigating Solo Network, and this past fall launched a podcast about solo aging. So that's a little bit about where I'm coming from in presenting on this topic. I wanted to make sure that everyone has a sense of the different sessions that are being offered. Tonight's session is an overview of the unique needs of solo agers. Our second session will be looking at healthcare, navigating healthcare, and also advanced care planning. Our third session will be looking at support systems. Our fourth session will be looking at housing options and questions that you might think about when you're exploring housing options. And then our last session, our fifth session, will be bringing it all together so that you have some tools to be able to either start or enhance your solo aging plan. A logistical reminder, you need to register for each session. So you do that on the library website. So obviously you registered for tonight. And if you haven't registered for February 6th, that's open, as well as registration is just open for the February 20th session, which is on support systems. So I just wanted to give you sort of a sense of where we're going and what we'll cover. For those of you who have returned from either our in-person session or a session I've offered somewhere else, thanks for joining again. And I feel that no one can hear this information too many times. We know that that the human development process is that we really need to hear something 7 times before it really sticks. And these are really big topics, and they can feel overwhelming. So feel free to join us for all of the sessions if you're available. So this evening, we are going to look at who solo agers are, the needs that are related to health and community, an overview of creating support systems, and a recipe for living a dynamic life, all in an overview format. And as I said, each one of those sessions will dive into the topic a little more. And then I'll also share some resources that will be helpful as you're exploring this topic. So I like to make sure that in my talks, we have a shared language and we're all starting from the same point. So it's been sort of an evolution in terms of coming to the phrase solo ager. People started off by referring to this slice of the demographic as vulnerable elderly, not a fan of that phrase. Unbefriended elders, which is really my least favorite. Geriatric orphans, elder orphans, kinless individuals, childless adults, solo seniors, solos, senior orphans, and finally, solo ager. Now, since I put this slide together, you can pretty much tell where I stand on the subject, right? I kind of went from the phrases that I detest the most to a phrase that I'm comfortable with. I'm aware that as solo aging has become more and more visible, people have different feelings about different phrases. However someone self-identifies is their choice. Use whatever phrase makes you happy, but just know that when I refer to solo agers and solo aging, I'm referring to an older adult who is without a reliable support system that also has any number of these 4 pieces. So for me, the foundational piece is that reliable support system. And that may be an individual who didn't have children, may or may not be partnered, lives on their own or with a partner, or they had children, but for a variety of reasons, from geography to complicated family dynamics to an unwillingness or an inability for people to assist, people are navigating some of these planning needs on their own. And so again, to make sure we all have shared language, I'm just going to warn you now, I will share this framework at the beginning of each one of the sessions because it's really important to me that we're working off of a shared language. So we definitely know that older adults in general prize independence, and that's a great attitude and a great perspective, but it can also sometimes be a barrier to providing and receiving support. So there are a number of statistics about people living on their own, people who are childless, but the one that seems to stick with people the most is that 1/4 of the baby boomer generation did not have children. Now, the other part of the conversation we often hear about is that we have a caregiving shortage. We, both in professionals, the ability to hire people to serve as caregivers, and in the personal connections for people in terms of accessing caregivers and caregiving support for their own family members. And so if you think about having a caregiving shortage already, and a quarter of the baby boomers not having children, we can see why proactive planning and how great it is to log in tonight and to other sessions to really think about this in a way where you're able to plan looking forward. So we know that there are more and more individuals who identify as solo agers because people are living longer. Our longevity has changed. And people are marrying later or having fewer children or no children at all or choosing not to marry or partner. And people are more mobile than they've been in the past. And so there are different choices about living arrangements. It's not as common that there are multi-generational households or multi-generational neighborhoods. And so all of those pieces have yielded more and more adults living on their own. And that's projected to actually be about 88 million people who are 65 and older by 2050, which is not so far away. So again, that proactive thinking about this is really important. Sarah Zeff Geber was the first person to write a book on solo aging. She actually coined the phrase solo ager. And in her book, Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers, which I have the information on at the end of the talk, on page 54, she mapped out what the social network would look like and does look like for people who have children. And so you have the connections to adult family members, to siblings, to community, to friends, to a partner or spouse. And then you have another layer of connections to their children's friends, parents, or grandparents. And then the same thing with grandchildren as well. So there could be two other additional layers for how people might connect with other people that might be navigating similar things in their life. And then Sarah mapped out what a social network looks like for solo agers. And all of the same pieces that were on the left side of the slide for someone with children remain, although these become much more integral into someone's support network. And so those community connections, the role of a spouse or partner, the friends, the other extended family members might play a role as well. And so it looks a little different. And so there's a lot of intentionality when it comes to solo agers building support networks so they're able to do effective planning. These are what I look at as the 7 planning needs for solo agers. There are those of you who have been with me in person where I ask, what do you notice about this particular graphic? People will tell me it's colorful. People will tell me it looks like a Trivial Pursuit wheel. But what I remind people is I chose a circle on purpose because a circle has no beginning or end, and neither does planning, right? Just when we've planned, we get to do it all over again and revise and make changes. And these 7 wedges are all equal in size and all interact with each other in the middle. They all touch each other. And so because of that, I chose to illustrate these 7 planning needs that way because they all impact each other. And it's really important to think about that not only in the long term, but in our everyday. And it's also important. People often ask me, how come you didn't include transportation as an eighth wedge? And the reason is it really doesn't stand alone. The transportation is really something that really weaves into all of these different pieces. So I would encourage people as they're thinking about planning to think about how access to transportation plays a role in your everyday and your long term. So what we do know is that humans in general, we procrastinate, especially when it's hard stuff. When the weather is beautiful, we'd rather go for a walk than sit and do our taxes, or sit and plan our financials, or sit and figure out our healthcare proxy. That when there are hard things to do, it is very easy to put them off, especially if you don't feel you have anyone to assign or designate to particular roles. And so people then tend to put that off. So I like to remind people that it's important to take a look at your daily, weekly, and monthly routine and be aware of the connections that you currently have. There are people you may see daily, there are people you may see monthly. There may be some connections that you have the opportunity to enhance that you may not have thought about before. And it's just a way to enhance that support network. The ideal is to plan to sustain our independence as long as we can. And then my other recommendation is that people build their own personal board of directors, their own support network that has people who are professionals and people who have personal connections with you as well. And all of those people together can help you with planning, can help you with making sure different things get done, help you in a time of need, etc. And during our session on support networks, I will go into more detail about having your own micro board of directors. Since I'm a healthcare advocate, I think about navigating healthcare a lot. And I work with people on navigating healthcare a lot. And while there are many, many universal complex pieces of the healthcare system, there are a number of particular health-related concerns for solo agers that can really impact health outcomes. And that often comes with transportation to and from medical appointments, or someone to sign someone out of a procedure where you've received anesthesia and you cannot drive yourself home, thank goodness, or take yourself home by yourself. You have to have someone sign you out and escort you home. And so for anyone who may not have that during the hours in which it's needed for the procedure, that can be a barrier. And for solo agers, it comes up very, very often. The most common example is needing to go for a colonoscopy and not having someone to sign you out after you receive the anesthesia and make sure you got home safely. The other thing that people have challenges with are things like emergency contacts and finding trusted individuals that they may want to give access to their medical records. That's not anyone. That's not just, we play cards together. I think I want to share my medical information with you. But it's more that somebody else looking at different pieces of your health records, whether that be notes from a doctor or recommendations, et cetera, that you then can talk to someone else about it with. And so being able to assign trusted individuals to have that access can be really important. Same thing with monitoring well-being and whereabouts, that check-in. I've heard a number of people who say they have somebody they text every morning or they text every evening just to say, I'm home safe and sound and heading to sleep. Or through different sessions they've attended, they found people that they want to connect with in that way and can serve in that way of support. And the other thing is care coordination and management. So help with getting to medical appointments, keeping track of them, keeping track of medications, etc. All of that, all of these different pieces are often barriers, especially for solo agers, that can really affect health outcomes. And so it's really helpful to be proactive to make sure that these things are in place or you're working to have them in place. So I know this may sound like a funny sentence, or phrase, but it's really helpful to plan for a medical crisis before one actually happens. As I say often, we can't change the science or the medical need, but we can change how we're scheduled to handle it. So do you have someone that you can rely on in case of a medical emergency? Sometimes I refer to that as a 3 a.m. person. You have someone to reach out to should an emergency come up. Have you thought about connecting with someone who might be available to accompany you to the ER or while you're admitted to the hospital? And also, while we're thinking about these things for ourselves, it's really important to also think about how we can play this role for other people who likely are in need as well. So you can always offer to help someone before you need the help yourself. That's a really good human thing to do. And it also is a good way to show that you're interested in different kinds of support. Making sure you have people or someone to drive you home from an appointment or a procedure that required anesthesia. Delaying those kinds of screenings or other procedures can have a not positive effect on health. So it's really important for that not to be a barrier if we can help it. It's also really useful for people to organize their documents and have them in an easy to find location. That's not under the mattress. It's not in a safe deposit box. It's not in a lawyer's office, although those are great places if you really want to have copies of things. But it also is these different documents, your emergency contact information, advanced directives, your healthcare proxy, your preferences for the care you want and don't want, should be easily grabbable, if that's a word, to be able to take with you or have on your person as during a medical emergency. In our next session, I'll sort of give you a checklist related to what I refer to as a go plan and a go bag and things you can compile so that you have that part of handling a crisis prepared, even though you don't know the medical part. But just to keep in mind, choose to organize it in a binder, in a file. Often people will say, well, I have all that information in my phone. And even though we are chatting on Zoom and there are many of us on the various screens, I am going to say to you to make sure you have the most important information about your healthcare on paper. You know paper, right? You remember it was made with trees, right? I always say go plant a tree as a way to balance things out. But the reason that I recommend paper is because while having digital copies of things is very useful, one, in a hospital or other care facility setting, we're not always able to access and log into the things we want to on our phones or other devices. Not all of the systems and all of the healthcare systems, MyChart and Athena and different things, they don't all speak to each other. Your clinicians cannot see something that's out of their system and portal. And if you're traveling, it's really important to have those things on paper because you definitely will not be in your home base portal, and you likely will not be able to access online the information in a way for a healthcare provider. So for all of those reasons, even in 2025, even on Zoom, even registering through the library online, I still really, really recommend having that important information on paper, and feel free to back it up electronically, but to have it immediately on paper. I joke in my in-person sessions that having it on paper, the reason I suggest that is because I've never met anyone who had a problem logging in to paper. I've never heard of anyone whose username never worked logging into a piece of paper. So because of that, having that information in front of you and available on your person can be really, really helpful. Not only are there particular things in terms of navigating transportation, having access to other people, but there are also pieces of making decisions that often are overlooked as things that can serve as a barrier for a solo ager. So when we look to identify reliable resources to be able to research information about a diagnosis, about a treatment option, et cetera, I'm sure you've heard this before, but Dr. Google is not the place to go to get reliable information. But once you have that reliable information, you may want to ask other people how they access, hopefully not Dr. Google, that reliable information, and have others to talk about that with, as well as estimating and managing costs, understanding and choosing between treatment options. You should always be given options when it comes to treatments. Other people to talk to about navigating the healthcare system, which is more and more complex every day. And if we think that's not complicated enough, insurance systems are even worse. And so having other people to ask questions of, to reliably be able to talk about these things with, is really important. And then finally, having people to bounce ideas off of when someone is approaching making a decision that definitely reflects their personal values, which may sound weird in a conversation about choosing your healthcare, but it's really important. Ideally, the decisions we make should align with our personal values, and also how something might impact our quality of life. If two treatment options, let's say, are the same, but one means you can't drive for a month and one means you can, and you are somebody who relies on being able to drive yourself around, that may impact the decision you make about a treatment option once you have informed information to be able to make that informed decision. But it's really useful to do that by talking to other people. And sometimes these are pieces when we're thinking about health that are often overlooked. So I just like to point them out so people have them on their checklist. When we're looking at an overview of putting together and maintaining a support network, those are people that you've intentionally chosen to be a part of your support team, who can provide care, they're respectful, they're offering support, and they're doing so with your best interest in mind. And also having a sense of your personal goals and making sure that you're able to achieve some of those things. So I always suggest to people that they have an age-diverse support network. Now, I know that as we get older, it is harder and harder to make meaningful connections. I know that. And yet I'm still saying, okay, in addition to that, please think about doing it in an age diverse way. In the past, when in person, when I've asked the question of why people might think I suggest age diversity, I have been surprised that consistently people have answered, well, so that you don't outlive your support network, which is not at all what I thought first. That never occurred to me when I actually started thinking about age diverse support networks. But it's a really good point. It also gives an opportunity when you're connected to people of all different ages in all different stages of life. People come with different experiences. People are available in different ways. People have different needs that you can help with as well. And so if we rely solely on our peers, it might be that our peers are going through similar things at similar times, whereas somebody who may be raising kids or at a different place in their life may have some time that's different, or some experience or skills that could really benefit you as part of your support system, and always good to keep in mind how you can then also help someone else out. So one way to evaluate and think about one's support network, both in the everyday and the long term, is to look at these 7 planning wedges and think about them in terms of who helps me now, if there are things that people are helping with, who's available to help, and what are the different pieces when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to advanced care planning, when it comes to thinking about where I want to live. Do I want to stay where I am? Am I open to moving once? Am I open to moving more than once? What type of community? All of those different things, understanding your financial situation and legal plans, knowing again who is a part of that age diverse support network, and a real intentionality around knowing what you might need now or thinking about what you might need in the future and how you might make connections that might help out in that way. I do not think this is easy. I know that I'm presenting it as if all you have to do is these 7 things, and you're all set. I know this is hard. I do. And it's not as simple as just putting it on a slide in pretty colors and calling it a night. But it's important, if you can, to work through these different pieces. And each one of us on the screen is at a different point in planning or revising or enhancing our plan. We're not all going to be at the same starting point, hence the circle. And that's okay. In fact, that's great, because then there's the opportunity to talk to different people about those things. So just a couple of other details related to support networks. Going back to that board of directors, having a informal and formal network, professionals who can help with legal and medical advocacy and advice, financial advisors, and friends and acquaintances for all other types of support. People who are involved in your support network do not have to be your best friends. They may play certain roles, and you may play certain roles for them as well. They don't all have to be the closest of connections. Once you have that support network in place, it's a living, breathing thing. And so it's really important to make sure that you assess it from time to time in terms of your needs, if they've changed over time, and if the people who are playing different roles for you, that their needs, their availability, their skills, their abilities have changed over time. That's important to think about as well. And it's okay if someone can't play a role, it's just important to know that so that you're able to then think intentionally about how to have people connect and be a part of your support system. I always encourage people to think about the buddy system, both because it's important to think about how we can help other people while also securing the help we need. Having emergency and non-emergency support can be really helpful in different ways. Different ways to connect can be online, in person, library programs, council on aging programs, a faith community, villages, affinity groups, meaning you join something because of an interest, which is a great way to have age diversity too. Online groups, etc. That's another avenue for building some connections. And then the other thing I really recommend to people is to find an accountability partner or create accountability group or team, whatever you want to call it. Now, that doesn't mean that this accountability team all has the same goals and tasks, but it does mean that if I have a friend or two friends or a connection or two connections, and we all have different goals, but we have been meaning to take care of them, but we keep procrastinating. But by talking about them out loud and telling someone else about something I want to accomplish, it often does help in getting things done. So, for example, two people decide they're going to meet every 2 weeks, either in person, they're going to talk on the phone, they'll meet over online chat. One person really has been meaning to call a financial advisor and just get the information of what it means to come in for a consultation. Maybe 2 or 3, if we're getting really greedy, that they want to call 2 or 3 financial advisors. And the other person really has some decluttering they want done in their house, and they need to identify some trusted professionals to come help them do that. And they've been meaning to research that or call particular professionals they've identified. Even though the goals and the tasks may be different, being able to share that with each other so that in 2 weeks' time, when we reconnect, we can share how far along we are on that particular goal or task, or maybe what tripped us up. And it can be as simple as procrastination, but it's another way to help us, to motivate us to connect with other people, to share, to hear other people's experiences, and to also be able to create a possibility of some accountability so you're able to move forward and you don't feel stuck in the overwhelm of all of those 7 wedges. It's important while we're thinking about all of those things that we want to make sure we're living a dynamic life, and that means learning to cope with change. It means finding some meaning, some joy, some purpose, staying connected to friends, to community, keeping your mind sharp, understanding your finances and some of your other planning needs, staying active, and some ideas for doing that can be taking up a hobby, reconnecting with a friend you've known a long time, which is why old is in quotes. Volunteering, another great human thing to do, also a great way to meet different people of different ages. Mentoring, crossing something off of your I've always wanted to do that list, joining a group, taking a class. You're logged on to this talk, and so being a lifelong learner is something that after tonight you can just feel like, oh, I can check that off. I'm definitely committed to that. So that's done. So congratulations. And so, but thinking about that as part of building your life, it is certainly something that I have a guess everyone who's logged in thinks about as well, but just something to keep in mind. So sometimes when I give this talk, That was a lot of information on a lot of slides and a lot of different things to think about that either in person or even on Zoom, people may not be sitting there literally with their hands on their head, but all they feel is overwhelmed and thinking, she's got to be kidding. She just put together all these slides and made it sound so simple. And it's not simple. What is she thinking? Right? And I know it's not simple, which is why I'm very committed to offering talks like this so that people have the tools they need to start planning proactively. So when you look at these 7 planning needs, you can make notes along the way of where you feel you are with these things. We're all, as I said, we're all in different places. So these 7 wedges, whether it comes to healthcare needs or residential, financial, legal, advanced care planning, building or enhancing your support network, and that lifelong learning piece, everybody's in different places. But it's important to think about those because then you can identify resources that might be helpful in exploring some of these topics. And as I mentioned, our next 4 sessions will also dive deeper into specific topics. And as a reminder, it's important to think about that in terms of our everyday, right? A lot of this planning, and we'll talk about this with advanced care planning, everybody thinks of it as end of life, right? But the reality is it's every day. It's what happens when you walk to your library or to walk to get a cup of coffee or pick up the newspaper or whatever. That's part of our everyday in planning. In addition to that long-term planning. So I just like to remind people, long-term planning is great and really important, but it's good to have a plan for every day as well. So this is those 7 wedges, but in a checklist form. It's the same 7. I'm really committed to those. I feel they're foundational for putting together a plan as one ages. As I mentioned, Sarah Zeff Geber's book, Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers, is an excellent resource for people interested in doing some planning related to solo aging or just planning in general. Joy Laverty's books, Who Will Take Care of Me When I'm Old, which is solo aging specific, and the Complete Elder Care Planner, which is now in its 4th edition, is comprehensive in terms of looking at all different kinds of aspects of planning from caregiving, solo aging, etc. All 3 of these books are available in our library systems all over the country. And so I like to make sure when I recommend books that no matter how people hope to access them, whether that's through an audiobook, whether that's hold the book in your hand, order it from your favorite bookstore, but know that they're also available in your library as well. There may become a wait list for them if you're in the same library, but just know that you can access them via the library. The American Society on Aging has a journal called Generations, and in July of 2023, they devoted all of their articles written by solo aging experts to solo aging topics, a wide array of topics, and they're available online and through the Navigating Solo Library, which I will show you in a second. This is the work I do with solo agers through my business, Beacon Patient Solutions. If you are somebody who utilizes Facebook, I'm not pro or against, I'm just sharing it as a resource. If you are somebody who uses it, there are a number of Facebook groups that I am a part of related to solo aging that I feel comfortable recommending. The Elder Orphans Facebook group was started by Carol Mark, who's in Texas. It has 15,000 members or something. It also has offshoots of people looking to relocate, people who like reading, people who like cooking, et cetera, et cetera. People Aging Solo is another Facebook group, and Solo Aging Without Personal Representative was started by two individuals, one who lives in Colorado, and the focus really is on identifying healthcare proxies and identifying financial powers of attorney and all of that. So it's a useful group as well. And then through the Navigating Solo Network and my business, I have Facebook groups for solo agers as well. In October of 2021, after the height of the pandemic, where many community education talks were being given online and they were being recorded, there were a number of solo aging educators who offered really great talks, but they were housed in all different places. And so I thought about how can we create a resource, a one-stop shop for people related to accessing resources for solo aging. And so in October of 2021, I created the Navigating Solo Network, which has online events, which people participate in from all over the country and Canada and Mexico, and also an online clearinghouse of resources and a free resource library. And in the resource library, there are books and articles, links to those, a whole archive of talks and videos about solo aging, different interviews or audio or podcasts with some other solo aging experts, a launching point for finding some local resources, as well as, believe it or not, there finally is research being done related to solo aging, and those research and reports are available. And then there are some solo aging infographics, different graphics created for social media that share some facts about solo aging. All of that's available in the library. You just go to navigating-solo.com and then the library, and you can access whatever you would like. You can also join a mailing list if that's interesting to you as well. This past August, after being really fortunate to, between talks and programs and working with clients, I'm really lucky to connect with really great professionals and really fantastic self-identified solo agers who all have interesting stories, expertise, and experiences. And so I launched a podcast where I interview professionals that do work that has a focus on solo aging, whether that's financial advisors, whether that's retirement coaches, caregiving coaches, et cetera, and individuals who are interested in sharing something about their life as a solo ager, preparing for retirement, navigating a new job, navigating a new phase of life, traveling on one's own, different kinds of things, and people have shared their stories. So the podcast is accessible on the website as well. You just have to press the podcast button and all the episodes will be available to you. They're also all available via video on YouTube. So if you prefer to listen, that's available. If you prefer to watch, that's available. So we just covered a lot in 48 minutes, something like that. So we looked at who solo agers were, really establishing that shared language, looking at some needs and some concerns related to health and community, sort of an overview on creating support networks and thinking about how to build and maintain a dynamic life. So with that, I am going to, you are welcome to join my business mailing list if you would like. That's on the screen. speakinpatientsolutions.com. I am going to stop sharing so that we can explore what's in chat and also just hear from each other as well.
Three, two, one.